All right, so welcome to our first civic education lecture video. And our lecture video is going to be on the Zambian Constitution. And I really want you guys to understand something. When it comes to social sciences, be it civic education, history, or commerce, what the examiners are looking for are specific terms. So you really have to study and know those key terms that you're supposed to use. You cannot use logic or common sense just because I'm watching Ukraine and Russia, and I'm watching news and I know a little bit of politics. It means I'm going to pass civic education. No, you have to really study the notes. You have to do a lot of research. So you have to be able to learn through association, the process of association. So you have to be able to read, know the specific terms and terminologies. And as usual, you have to be able to go through specific past papers. So my name is Mike. I have a bachelor's degree in science, and I'm currently about to finish a diploma in teaching methodology. So I'm both a scientist, a social scientist, as well as a teacher. I really love teaching. It's really my passion, and I really want you to learn efficiently, high quality lessons. Okay, so today our main focus for civic education is the Zambian Constitution. And the main key elements that you're supposed to know are your objectives. So let's review our objectives. As students, you really have to know the specific things that you're supposed to know for your exams, because social sciences are very bulky and we only want to focus on things that are relevant for you to get that distinction or credit or merit, whatever your goal may be. So at least you have to be able to define what a constitution is and at least relate a constitution to democracy and good governance systems, which will be future topics that we're going to discuss. You have to know the different types of constitutions. You have to know the constitution in Zambia. So under the constitution in Zambia, you have to be able to know the history. You cannot escape history because you have to pay attention to detail. These questions usually come in section A, your multiple choice, as well as your essay type questions, even your one-word answer types of questions. All your constitutional reforms you have to know directly to the year of that reform and the specific Parliament Act that led to that reform. You have to know these specifics. And as usual, you have to know and understand the characteristics of a constitution. So let's go further and define what a constitution is. So in layman's terms, which are very detailed layman's terms, a constitution can be defined as the basic principles and laws. Why I'm saying the basic principles and laws, because sometimes basic principles can be customary. Based on the society or culture that we are currently, that a state may be currently in. So a constitution are your basic principles and laws. Laws, they may be written. So basic principles and laws of a nation, a state, or a social group that determine the powers and duties of the government and guarantee certain rights to the people in it. No wonder a constitution is actually defined. You can actually say it's the basis of democracy because one, the constitution is going to put people in power by the people, and the constitution stands to protect the rights of those people that have put forth that constitution. So you really have to understand this. No wonder the nature or a way of viewing the constitution is an expression of will or desire of the people. So the will of the people, the desire of the people. Secondly, it can be seen as, a contract, a social contract between the government as an entity, definitely not an independent entity, and the people. So the will of the people in collaboration with a contract with the government and the people. You have to understand these in details, that a constitution can exist in 4 different forms, although there are other forms, but that's beyond our syllabus. But within our syllabus, we can say a constitution can either be a written constitution, an unwritten constitution, a flexible constitution, and a rigid constitution. So at times you can even just apply your basic English to actually know what a written, unwritten, flexible, and rigid constitution is. But remember, like I said, with social sciences, you have to pay clear attention to detail. So what is a written constitution? As per the definition, a written constitution is a type of constitution that is contained within a single document. So it's squeezed, it's cramped up, it's highly reviewed in one specific document, and it can be easily procured, meaning you can even go on an online source, you can purchase it, it's freely available to the public, and consulted on any issue covered in it. So it's subject to discussion and debate because it's written within a single document. So what are some of the merits? What are some of the good distinguishing characteristics that a written constitution is supposed to have? The first thing is that it has to be clear and definite, meaning it shouldn't be ambiguous. It has to be able to be read and understood even by a literate citizen or an illiterate citizen. Just by the oral explanation, someone has to be able to clearly understand what's being spoken about. Like I said here, people can read and understand the structure and functions of each organ of the government. Okay, this is the legislature, this is the judiciary. So these are the different functions of these different organs of the government. Even if someone is educated, even if someone is uneducated, one has to be able to understand. It has to be clear, non-ambiguous. It cannot be easily amended to suit the popular emotions. So amended means changed, because a written constitution is somewhat, it's written, meaning for you to change it, you need certain procedures, maybe through an act of parliament, or maybe through a referendum of the people. So it's actually good because it's written. What is written cannot easily be changed. So it's not easily amended to suit popular emotions. One of my favorite points of a written constitution is that it is clear and democratic, since citizens are able to prove by reading. So you can actually prove by reading. You can get your constitution and say, is this right? Is this sound? Are our rights safe? Did we elect the proper people? Are these governance systems that we have in our country in line with the rule of law? Are they in line with sound democratic practices? So that's a good part. It's clear and democratic, since citizens are able to prove by reading. So what are some of the characteristics of a written constitution that make it unfavorable to democratic processes? So now we talk about the demerits. So the powers of interpretation are always with the judiciary on the rules. So in terms of the rules, lawyers and the judiciary, they are very educated people. So it can be subject to different interpretations, and you can find that even someone who's innocent, someone hasn't done anything, like maybe someone from an opposition party can be arrested and saying, this is unlawful and this isn't in line with the constitution based on this act number this, from higher judiciary lawyers. So the powers of interpretation require a high level of intellect sometimes, and that can be, it can lead to unfavorable, unlawful consequences that you were able to see throughout our election period in Zambia. Like I said, again, the judges may interpret the rules wrongly. Another thing is that, a constitution has to have certain segments, like, a segment on human rights could be interpreted within another volume on its own, just, human rights, children's rights. However, it encompasses everything, it crams up everything. It compresses all the rules and ideas within a single document, which becomes a little bit unfavorable. So what of an unwritten constitution? A constitution that is not fixed within a single document. What are some of the good components of an unwritten constitution? And what are some of the demerits of an unwritten constitution? As per definition, an unwritten constitution is a type of constitution that is not contained within a single document. This type of constitution is partially written and partly oral. So like common law and customary law, like I said, Zambia also has some form of customary law. An unwritten constitution grows from the many years of practical experience and from the political way of the people, like the British monarch. The British Constitution is a very good example of a written constitution. So if an MCQ comes, give an example, the following countries have a form of unwritten constitution. The best answer would be the British government. However, certain British constitutional laws are actually written, like for example, in the Bill of Rights, punctuation vocabulary area there, it has to be double O, one O, Bill of Rights, and Act of Settlements. And we'll be able to discuss these two topics in details. So the good part about a written constitution, so you have to know the merits of an unwritten constitution, is that it's flexible and easily changed or amended to suit new circumstances or occurrences. Like for example, a civil war, a state of emergency, where people are not happy with how they are treated. We can have some form of flexibility where certain rules within the constitution can actually be altered. It's best for unexpected emergencies without breaking its framework, like war, like I mentioned. It prevents resolutions by satisfying popular demands. Remember, a constitution projects the will of the people. So it means the people have to take part in changing the constitution. And it can prevent resolutions by satisfying popular demands because the majority always wins when it comes to the act of decision making. So what are some of the unwanted characteristics or the demerits of an unwritten constitution? It cannot be read and understood. Customary law, oral tradition. Therefore, it is very difficult to be mastered. What someone might tell you can change over time. The other thing is that it's very unstable and it can be changed at any time. So, instability is not a good characteristic of governance. People want their rights to be protected. People want to feel protected. You don't want to wake up one day and just find the majority agrees on one thing and you're not comfortable with, and you're forced to compromise on something that you're not comfortable with. So as a citizen, that can lead to some form of political instability and unsafety, and you may want to relocate because your country has this unwritten constitution that constantly changes and can compromise your rights as an individual. It depends on the customs, not on a written document for verification and confirmation. So if something goes astray, no judiciary or judge will be able to say it is written in the constitution, therefore you haven't committed A, B, and C. There is no verification, there is no confirmation. Okay, so I hope you've understood that. So let's now go on and talk about the distinctions between a flexible constitution and a rigid constitution. So flexible, easily adjustable, bendable. A flexible constitution is a constitution which can easily be amended. So to amend means to change without a very cumbersome procedure. This type of constitution may be amended like a statute with a simple majority vote of the members of parliament. So we selected our members of parliament. They can come in and sort of vote and change the constitution somehow. That's what it means for a constitution to be a flexible constitution. What are some of the merits of a flexible constitution? Like I said, it can easily be changed to suit and meet emergencies. It allows new convenient ideas to be included in the rules because we live in a society where ideas keep on changing. The way people view certain elements now may be different from the way people view certain elements in the future. For example, certain Islamic states, women were not actually allowed to drive. So, it's convenient. It is more democratic by consistent changing to suit people's demands. Like I said, a constitution is like a social contract between the government and it projects the will of the people. So it's actually true, it's a true democratic practice. So it's a more democratic by consistent changing to suit the demand, to suit people's demands. So there are certain disadvantages or demerits of this flexible constitution. Frequent changing makes people lose confidence and trust. You need something that is stable. You just don't want to see rules changing from one form to another. It does not fully follow the principles of democracy, since even a simple majority changes in parliament. You wake up one day and just see parliament has voted towards a change. Let's say 1 minute, women are allowed to drive vehicles. The next minute, women are told to put on their veils and stay indoors, and they're just not allowed to drive. So certain things like that, and it's not stable. A very stable form of constitution, though not one of the best forms of constitution, but it could be the best, is a rigid constitution where people have to vote, people have to meet, people have to debate upon even minute changes within the constitution is called a rigid constitution. This is one that cannot be easily amended. It can only be amended by a constitutional assembly, national constitutional conference, and a referendum. So for example, once this group of people meet, it can include a 2/3 majority vote of the members of the central government register, as well as a 2/3 majority vote in 2/3 of the state legislature, so even a 50+1. So here we're talking about people organizing themselves, meeting up, or even through a referendum where actually people can even vote to change those elements of the constitution, which actually makes it good because I, as a citizen, can actually have a form of stability if I voted for a certain change in rule. And I'll have that confidence within me because for them to change even a minute form, it would need another huge majority vote through some form of referendum. So it can only be changed by special procedures. Hence, no one can change it to suit a specific individual. So the good part about this constitution is that it also serves to protect the rule of law. That's the beauty of this rigid constitution. So what are some of the demerits of a rigid constitution? It is not representative enough in democracy because it's not easily subjective to change. Like I said, even just changing one minute, whether, certain rules can be either positive or negative. And if you are trying to change some of the negative forms, some of the most outdated forms of rules, it might take years. So it's actually not a good representation of democracy. And the United States of America is an example of a rigid constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, you cannot escape history. This is where you actually have to pay particular attention to detail, because you'll be asked questions on the history of the constitution in Zambia. So constitutional development in Zambia can actually be traced back, way back to British colonial times, especially from the beginning of the 1950s. So where we're now headed towards independence. The constitutional development during this period was marked by an establishment of the Federation of Nyasaland and Rhodesia through the order in council. So there was an order in council, because by then Zambia was still primarily ruled by the whites, and they actually still wanted white interest. So this order in council, it was a legislation made in the name of the monarch, white people of the monarch, in some Commonwealth countries, and Nigeria is actually one of those Commonwealth countries of 1953. The order specified the prerogatives of the federal and territorial governments. Like I said, Nigeria, so this was based on the 1950s European Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Freedoms. So because the world was sort of evolving, and they wanted to sort of seem like they're actually trying to protect human rights, but in fact, it was still for the benefits of the whites at the time. So these rights were actually called, very racist somehow, neo-Nigerian rights. And they were incorporated in most of the Commonwealth countries, Zambia and Nigeria being part of the Commonwealth. Thus, the Constitution of Zambia is modeled along the lines of the Nigerian Constitution of 1963. Towards independence in 1964, Zambia inherited the Northern Rhodesia Self-Governance Constitution of 1963. Like I said, because it was under this council here, this was just simply to safeguard the interest of white people. In 1964, Zambia has had many oh my goodness, this is high yield. You are not supposed to, you have to know all these in details. You can revise this video, you can rewind it, you can write them down somewhere, rewind, study your notes. You're going to have your notes as your companion. You have to know all these. Zambia has had many constitutional review commissions to improve the constitution. So constitutional review commissions. So what was the first constitutional review commission? So this happened towards the Second Republic. So this was the Second Republic, Kaunda's time. So increasing challenges from opposition parties to Kaunda's dominance over the country during the First Republic eventually forced Kaunda to institutionalize a one-party state as a way to prevent ethnic rivalries and promote national unities, one Zambia, one nation. It was argued that the elimination of the political pluralism will lead to unity and foster social, economic development. So ethnic rivalries, now that white people have gone, Zambia might have even been in some form of civil war. Well, I'm Lozi, I'm Bemba, I'm Tonga, etc. So Kaunda, in all of his wisdom, said, you know what? To, prevent this political instability from ethnic groups, let's try to eliminate multi-party state system. Therefore, in 1968, a referendum was organized, and 4 years after, a constitutional review commission headed by Vice President Maiza Chona. No wonder it's called the Choma Review Commission, Chona Review Commission. So find the spelling there from the notes. No wonder it's called the Chona Review Commission, was established in a move that opened the window for the institutionalization of a one-party rule. It is a highly remote controlled process by the Kaunda administration. A new constitution which abolished multipartism and declared UNIP the one party recognized by law, and this was passed in 1973. This development reinforced presidential rule in Zambia as the president became the key player of the political scene. So this was all in good faith, or it may not have been in good faith, depending on how you view it, because there was a lot of ethnic rivalries, and Kaunda just wanted to, unite the Zambian people. So let's now go to the Mvunga Constitutional Review Commission. So now people are becoming woke, and they've had it. So unable to resist the winds of change, change, you can't resist change, that were blowing across the continent with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War in the early 90s. That was post-Cold War. A new constitutional reform commission headed by, these people were very educated, headed by Professor Mfanza Patrick Mvunga. No wonder it's called the Mvunga Constitutional Review Commission, was appointed by Kaunda to draft a new constitution that will restore multi-party democracy. So multi-party democracy was restored in the Mvunga Constitutional Review Commission. This was the Constitutional Act that was promulgated, so it was in August 31st, 1991. In the absence of time for a proper constitutional review, this constitution was essentially a transitional document designed to meet the needs at the time, so change through time. However, the most significant constitutional review commission, the one that, made a little bit more sense, encompassing a variety of rights, was the Mwanakatwe Review Commission. So with the demise of Kaunda, not really the death, but him voted off power. So with the demise of Kaunda and the election of Frederick Chiluba as president, there was a new attempt was made to get a lasting constitution for Zambia, something that is more stable. A new commission chaired by John Mwanakatwe, no wonder it's actually called the Mwanakatwe Review Commission, was appointed in 1993 to draft a constitution. So unfortunately, the process failed to win popular support, and the resulting constitutional amendment in 1996, we'll talk about this one, was considered to lack legitimacy, as most of the commission's recommendations presented in 1995 were ultimately rejected by the government. However, I want you to focus on this one. Like I told you, it was actually more sound because it introduced a little bit of notable things. So I'm going to highlight these in yellow. So most notably was a proposed drastic increase in the protection of human rights of women and the prohibition of laws, customary practices, and stereotypes which worked against the dignity of women. Economic protection of women, including maternity leave, was also included. Pay attention, as was a comprehensive provision on children's rights. So children's rights were actually recognized highly during the Mwanakatwe Review Commission. Hope we are together, hope we are taking notes, hope we are reading with me. Watch the video, read the notes, watch the video, read the notes. Eventually, repetition is the mother of education. Eventually, this will be like, it will be at the tip of your hands. Ngomba Review Commission. I'm not so good at pronouncing Pan-African sounding names. So Ngomba Review Commission. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. So in 2001, Levi Mwanawasa ascended to the helm of state, and in 2003 initiated Zambia's fourth review process, headed by this guy, Wila Ngomba, and this happened in December 2005. So one of the key things that happened during this constitutional review period was that recommending the use of single-member majoritarian system, the 50+1 vote. However, and this is the most interesting part, you have to know how this story ends, because it leads to something that's very interesting, a commission that was formed to actually review constitutions, debate constitutions, and present those to the public with the view of a referendum. So you have to know a certain aspect that I'm going to explain very soon. President Mwanawasa initiates the fifth constitutional review process by presenting a 14-step roadmap for constitutional reform spreading over 258 weeks. It was met with resistance. And it was met with a lot of resistance. And it's a very long story, but I'm going to tell you how it ends by summarizing the process. And this is how the story ends. And this is actually a very brilliant conclusion to the story. So a compromise was reached in June 2007 when both parties agreed to a plan brokered by political parties under the auspices of the Zambian, under the review of the Zambian Center for Inter-Party Dialogue. The plan emphasized the need, and here's the interesting part, the plan emphasized the need to establish a body mandated to adopt a new constitution or amend the existing one, but did not provide that body with the legislative power in order to prevent the legal difficulties involved. So a popular body could come up with a draft constitution that could be enacted by parliament. So you can have a body. Let me distinguish this. So you could have a body. So a popular body could come up with a draft constitution that could be enacted by parliament and then be partly presented to the Zambian citizens in a referendum. The members of the proposed body, which was to be called the National Constitutional Conference, know this, the National Constitutional Conference, were to be nominated by the different interest groups instead of being elected. So this is why at the Act number 19 of the 2007 National Constitutional Conference states that to gather that body, and I want you to know these keywords. Remember, keywords are very important. In this act, unless the context otherwise requires, adopt, so you can adopt, in relation to the draft constitution means to examine, debate, agree, and submit to the minister in accordance with this act, the provisions of the final draft constitution or part thereof to be submitted. So you can have a body that can, adapt, examine, debate, agree, and submit some form of additions to the constitution that may be presented to the public in a form of a referendum. So constitutional adoption process. So this means the process of actually approving a copy of a draft constitution, and it can be done in two ways. Through Parliament, the draft constitution is taken to Parliament, where the members of Parliament debate on the draft constitution before adopting it. And you know, Zambia has actually had 3 of these. Or through a constitutional assembly. This is a body of representatives elected by their respective interest groups. So a constitutional assembly is actually interesting because it has certain bodies of the Zambian public, certain sections, churches, learning institutions, trade unions, and also student bodies. And this is actually a good representation of the Zambian citizens. So it's actually a good way because it's actually free from government interference. You have a representative in each section. So it's easy to actually change the constitution. And like I've been saying, the constitution is the reflection of the will of the people, of the citizens, a contract between the people and the government on how they are supposed to be ruled. Therefore, you need to have certain characteristics of a good constitution. It shouldn't be ambiguous. It must be clear. Anyone should be able to read and understand. This means the languages used must be simple and not too technical to be understood. In fact, it should also be translated into many languages without actually changing the meaning of sentences. Must not be rigid to prevent change, nor too flexible to allow unnecessary change. So it has to be semi-rigid, semi-flexible, so that you can change, but also have that sense of security and have that sense of stability, which is another characteristic of a good constitution. It must be stable and be able to stand the test in time. It must be able to protect and respond to social, economic, and political needs of the citizens. It's the citizens involved, it's the citizens' rights involved, and the constitution has to be able to protect at the social level, economic level, as well as political level. Cater for the interests of various groups in society, the church, the teaching institutions, protects the rights of the citizens. So what's the importance of the constitution? You've said the characteristics of a good constitution. So what is the importance of the constitution? I referred to that one. It promotes and protects the rule of law. And the rule of law is the political philosophy that all citizens and institutions within a country, state, or community are accountable to the same laws. So in short, you can actually say it states no one is above the law. We are held accountable to the same laws. So that's the first importance of the Constitution. It promotes and protects the rule of law. It safeguards the fundamental rights and freedoms of the citizens, ensures democratic governance because it's the will, it's a social contract between the people and the governing body. It gives equal opportunities for individual development. Your rights are protected, therefore you are more creative, you have more potential for individual development. Do you want to leave the country? Do you want to come back? You have that freedom of movement, of setting up your business, because you are protected, you are backed up by a constitution. So this table actually gives a summary of some of the components of the Zambian Constitution, stating you have to review this table in your own time. It's actually a beautiful table. I took time to create this table because The material that I used, the textbook that I used, it was a little bit archaic. So I had to rewrite this table. So national sovereignty of the state, the country is an independent state, no outside interference. Citizenship deals with the qualification for Zambian citizenship and withdrawal of citizenship. There's a topic called citizenship that we're going to do. Actually, most of these are actually individual topics. Protection of the fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual deals with the rights and freedoms of individuals which are protected. The executive, these are now wings of the government. Elections, the time of office and removal of president from office. Functions of the president administers the legislature, qualification for election or National Assembly, the judicature, deals with the courts and appointment of judges, defense and national security, the police, the military, local government systems, structure and function of the local council. Directive principles of state policy and duties of a citizen deals with development of national policies and application of constitution making and enactment of laws. Finance, taxation, funds, capital, service commissions, pension laws and protection, human rights commission, extremely important. Its establishment, its independence, its functions, powers, composition, and procedures. Chiefs and House of Chiefs, customary law, institution of chiefs and House of Chiefs, functions and composition, as well as the miscellaneous or other. They are significant but less significant. Resignations, reappointments, concurrent appointments. So in 1996, constitutional begins with a preamble. So every constitution begins with a preamble. This means an introduction to the actual document of the Constitution. It explains the aims and purpose of the Constitution and government. So this is the preamble of Zambia, and we're going to read it together. So as amended by Act number 18 of 1996, we, the people of Zambia, by our representatives, assemble in our parliament, having solemnly resolved to maintain Zambia as a sovereign democratic republic, determined to uphold and exercise our inherent and inviolable right as a people to decide, appoint, and proclaim the means and style to govern ourselves. Recognize the rights, worth of men and women in their rights to participate and freely determine and build a political, economical, and social system of their own free choice. Pledge to ourselves that we shall ensure the state shall respect the rights and dignity of the human family, uphold the laws of the state, and conduct the affairs of the state in such manner as to preserve, develop, and utilize its resources for this and future generations. Declare the Republic a Christian nation while upholding the right of every person to enjoy the person's freedom of conscience or religion. Resolve to uphold the values of democracy, transparency, accountability, and good governance. And further resolve that Zambia shall forever remain unitary, indivisible, multi-party, and democratic sovereign state. Do hereby enact and give to ourselves this constitution. So this is the end of the topic of the Zambian Constitution. Please revise this video. Watch the video, read your notes, then do these revision questions. You have to understand and study these revision questions that I have made for you. I'm not going to answer them for you because I've taught the topic. So it's your job to research, find the answers within your notes, read other resources, gain more knowledge. Briefly explain characteristics of a good constitution. Name the parts of the constitution which outlines the aims and purposes. Which of the following characteristics of a good constitution discourages tampering with basic principles? It must be, is it flexible? Is it stable? Is it rigid? Research. Which Constitutional Review Commission recommended the inclusion of children's rights in the Zambian Constitution for the first time? Read. Which of the following statements is not true about the National Constitution? The Zambian National Conference was established under the National Constitutional Conference Act 19 of 2007. Which of the function of the National Constitutional Conference? What was its function? To read. You have to read. With reference to the Zambian Constitution, answer the following questions. You have to read, everything is in the notes, explain the concept of constitution, identify the forms of constitution. Why did Zambia inherit the Northern Rhodesia self-government constitution of 1996? So I actually aim by June, those of you who are writing the GCE exams, at least by May, we should actually at least do 12 topics. Then after doing those 12 topics, then June, we should just focus on reviewing past papers, one past paper at a time. Then you'll be ready for your civic education exam. So thank you for the support. I'll see you in the next lecture. This has been Brainworks Education.